On a stormy Boston morning, Eliza entered her mother-in-law's will reading, expecting nothing, only to face her cheating husband, his mistress, and their newborn. They thought victory was theirs, but Beatrice's final words changed everything. All estates, jewels, and fortune went to Eliza. Harrison was left with nothing but an old compass and a note. So you may find yourself again. That day was not revenge, but the birth of Eliza's freedom. It was raining in Boston that morning, an ugly October rain. This wasn't some soft rain from a love song. It was a cold anger from the sky. Hard sheets of water slapped my car's windshield. I was parked on a side street in Beacon Hill with its old cobblestones, right across from the big brick building of Davies, Caldwell and Dunn. I just sat in the car for about 10 minutes, watching the wipers fight a losing battle. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I hadn't thought today would feel like a funeral, but that's what it felt like. A funeral held in a stuffy courtroom. Maybe that's what it was. The death of Beatrice Prescott, my mother-in-law, left a hole in me bigger than I could admit, even to myself. The sickness had been eating at her for a year. Our calls got shorter near the end, her voice weaker. But a dumb, childish part of me still thought she would always be there, like a lighthouse, when I needed her most. She wasn't my real mom, not by blood, but in a million little ways, she was more of a mother to me than the one who gave birth to me. The official letter with a real wax seal showed up 2 days after she died. It called me to the reading of the will. My name, Mrs. Eliza Monroe, was printed right under my husband's. I wasn't sure why I had to be there. I came with no hopes. Beatrice was a kind woman, yes, but I wasn't there for money. I came because I owed her a proper goodbye. A broken part of me needed to close the book on this chapter of my life. I just needed to hear her voice one last time, even from a dry piece of paper. I took a deep breath and opened the car door. A cold wind blew into my coat, carrying the smell of wet leaves. I stepped out into the storm. The heels of my shoes made sharp, lonely clicks on the wet pavement. The black dress I wore, a simple and nice choice, now stuck to my skin. The law firm building stood tall in front of me. Its dark bricks and big windows reflected the gray, sad sky. It looked more like a tomb than an office. But as soon as my foot touched the granite steps to the main door, I froze. I couldn't breathe. He was there. Harrison, my husband. He stood under the awning, totally dry and slick, in a perfectly fitted navy blue suit. His silver silk tie was knotted just right. He had that same proud look he always wore like a shield, even in the rain. And in her arms, wrapped in a cream-colored blanket, was a newborn baby. She held the child like a prize she had just won. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. I had my doubts. Of course, I had my doubts for a long time. The late-night calls he would rush to the balcony to answer, these sudden business trips on weekends, the sickly sweet smell of perfume on his shirts that was not mine. But knowing is one thing. Seeing is something else. Seeing them stand there together, a whole family, felt like a punch to the chest. Harrison saw me. He didn't flinch. Not surprised, not ashamed, he just tightened his jaw, a muscle twitching, and gave me that look I knew so well. Half pity, half disgust. It was the look he saved for old furniture he was about to replace. Kendall looked me up and down. Her blue eyes were cold and judging, like I was a bug on her perfect picture. She shifted the baby in her arms, then leaned in to whisper something in Harrison's ear. She let out a soft, sweet, but mean laugh. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could guess. "Look who it is. Your ex-wife still has the nerve to show up?" I felt a strong urge to turn and run. God, I wanted to turn and just melt into the rain, to never see them again. But something kept me in place. Maybe it was my last bit of pride. Maybe it was the anger bubbling up inside me. Or maybe it was the ghost of Beatrice, standing somewhere behind me, putting a hand on my shoulder, telling me never to run. So I took another deep breath, trying to keep it from shaking. I stood up straight, lifted my head, and walked up the last few steps. Neither of them moved to greet me, not even a nod. They just moved to the side, leaving just enough room for me to pass. I kept my eyes straight ahead, focused on the heavy oak door, and walked into the building as if I still belonged in their lives, as if my heart wasn't breaking into a million pieces. Inside, the law office smelled of old wood, leather, and expensive paper. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beat of the rain on the windows. A young woman at the front desk nodded at me and led us into a large meeting room. The walls were lined with dark wood shelves full of thick leather-bound books. A long, shiny cherry wood table took up most of the room. reflecting the dim light from a crystal lamp. Harrison and Kendall sat on the other side of the table from me. They sat close, whispering things to each other behind fake smiles. Harrison's hand rested on the back of Kendall's chair like he owned it. I sat alone on the other side. The distance between us felt like a huge gap. The only sounds in the tense room were the ticking of an old clock in the corner and the soft rustle of papers as the lawyer, Mr. Arthur Davies, came in. Mr. Davies was a man in his 60s, with perfectly combed silver hair and a nice gray suit. He held a dark looked at us over his glasses with calm eyes that gave nothing away. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and steady. "We are here today for the reading of the last will of Mrs. Beatrice Prescott. Present are her son, Mr. Harrison Prescott, his friend, Miss Kendall Shaw, and of course, Mrs. Eliza Monroe." My heart jumped when I heard my name. I didn't know how much I needed to hear it said out loud, to feel like I was really there. Mr. Davies opened the folder slowly. "Before we start with the will itself, I want to let you know that Mrs. Prescott also left a personal letter. She asked that this letter be read out loud after the main parts of the will are announced." The room got even quieter. Kendall crossed her legs and looked bored. Harrison folded his arms across his chest, looking confident and in charge. I sat still, my hands clenched in my lap, getting ready for whatever truth Beatrice had left. My mind went back to the last time I saw Beatrice. It was a late summer afternoon with pale sun. She was in her favorite sunroom looking out at the rose garden. She was wrapped in a blue cashmere shawl. A cup of tea sat next to her, almost untouched, with steam rising from it. She looked smaller than I remembered, more frail, but when she spoke, her voice was still strong and sure, the way I had always counted on. That day she reached over and took my hand. Her hand was thin but warm. She looked right into my eyes and said, "Eliza, you are so much stronger than you think. Don't ever let anyone, not even my son, make you forget that." I didn't know it was goodbye. I just thought she was cheering me up. When I first married Harrison, Beatrice was very warm and kind to me. I didn't expect that from a woman in Boston's high society. She was classy and quiet, a woman who could say a lot by not saying anything. But she never made me feel like I didn't belong. Not once. Maybe because she saw something in me, a strength, a loyalty, that her son in his pride never bothered to see. Back then, Harrison paid attention to me, or at least he acted like he did. We were the perfect couple at every charity party, with smiling faces on every Prescott family Christmas card. But at home, behind closed doors, I started to feel like I wasn't there. My ideas were just cute. My worries were too much. And when I started to ask about his late nights and the calls from clients at midnight, he stopped even pretending to care. He built a wall of ice between us, and I was left cold and alone. So Kendall Shaw was no surprise. Women like her rarely are. She had brighter lipstick, a louder laugh, and a habit of always touching Harrison's arm like he belonged to her. I saw them together by accident once, at a symphony concert that Beatrice was paying for. They didn't see me. I stood behind a marble pillar, frozen, as I watched Kendall lean in and whisper something that made... Not then. I just left quietly, went home, and heated up the dinner he would never eat. I folded his laundry. I stayed quiet because that's what I was taught to do. A good wife doesn't cause problems. But Beatrice saw. She always saw everything. After that night, she started asking me over for tea more often. She never said Harrison's name or asked about my marriage. She would just watch me with her steady gray eyes, as if she was waiting for me to fall apart, but also giving me the strength not to. So, when she died, a big part of me died too. I felt lost, like the only person in the world who really saw me was gone. That's why I walked into this law office with no hopes at all. No property, no favors, no notice. Just the last trace of her voice in a room full of people who had forgotten me long ago. And now here I was, sitting across from my husband and his mistress, his new family, while Beatrice's lawyer turned the pages that were about to break their fake little dream. They thought I would just go away. They thought I would take a little money and disappear. Harrison hadn't said a word since we came in, but he didn't need to. His silence was a weapon. It was planned and rude. His posture screamed that he was in charge. But the blue veins on the back of his hands told a different story. They twitched every time Mr. Davies turned a new page. Kendall was not as quiet. She kept moving around, her greedy eyes looking at the leather folder like it was a bomb full of gold. She gently bounced the baby on her lap, even though it was asleep. It was more to show off as a mother than to comfort the baby. Now and then, she would look at me and smirk. It was the smile of someone who thinks they've won. "Calm down, honey," I heard her whisper to Harrison. "It's almost over. Then we can go celebrate." Harrison put his hand on hers to calm her down. "I know. My mother always did things by the book." I could tell they had practiced for this moment. In their minds, the story was already written. Beatrice, a woman who cared about tradition, would leave her whole huge fortune to her only son. He was the heir, the one with the family name, the perfect image of the family's past. And I, Eliza, the wife who was about to be thrown out, would get a polite, "Sorry for your loss," maybe a check big enough to keep me quiet, and a note thanking me for the past years. Its contents, artwork, and antiques. Kendall took a small, sharp breath. I saw her squeeze Harrison's hand. That was the house she had always dreamed of running. Along with the summer home in Edgartown, Martha's Vineyard, known as Sea Haven, and the apartment on the Upper East Side, Manhattan. The list went on, and each item was more amazing than the last. A collection of paintings by famous artists, a large number of stocks in big companies, the Prescott family jewels, including the diamond necklace Beatrice wore at our wedding, and even the old Steinway piano that had belonged to her grandmother. With each item he read, Kendall's smile got bigger, and Harrison sat up taller, looking more pleased with himself. He gave me a quick look, a look of pity from someone who thinks they've won. Then Mr. Davies stopped. A long, planned silence made the whole room hold its breath. He looked at all three of us, and then his eyes stopped on me. He went on reading, his voice clear and firm, leaving no room for doubt. "All of the above physical and money assets, with no exceptions, along with the rest of my property, after all debts and funeral costs are paid, are to be left in their whole to my daughter-in-law, Mrs. Eliza Marie Foster Monroe." A rustle of paper, the screech of Harrison's chair, and then total silence. I blinked. My ears were ringing. For a moment, I thought I must have heard wrong, that my sad brain had made up a different story to protect itself. But no, it was there, printed clearly in black ink on the cream-colored page the lawyer was now slowly turning. My name, again, not Harrison's. Kendall's mouth fell open, her perfect red lipstick now looking ugly. Harrison's face looked like he had just been slapped. His healthy tan was gone, replaced by a pale, sick white. They thought they had won. They were wrong. For a moment that felt like forever, no one spoke. Mr. Davies's words hung in the air like dust in a sunbeam, impossible to ignore, impossible to wave away. I felt my heart thumping, so hard I was afraid the others could hear it. But it wasn't the beat of happy victory, or even shock. It was a deep, huge disbelief that Beatrice had done this. She had left me everything. Harrison was the one who broke the silence. He let out a short, dry laugh, a sound that was strange and out of place in the room's quiet mood. "Mr. Davies, I think there's been a serious mistake," he said, his voice as sharp as a piece of broken glass. "It must be a typo. My mother meant Harrison Prescott, not Eliza." Mr. Davies, without looking up from the paper, replied coldly, "There is no mistake, ma'am." "Ours!" "Shut up, Kendall," Harrison snapped, his calm manner breaking like a dam. She turned back to the lawyer, her voice now high and shaky with panic. "This is crazy, ridiculous. That woman," she pointed a perfectly painted finger at me, the blood-red nail like a weapon, "is barely a part of her life anymore. Beatrice couldn't have meant this. She was sick. She wasn't in her right mind." Mr. Davies finally lifted his head, looking straight at Kendall over his glasses. "Ms. Shaw, I can promise you, Mrs. Prescott was of perfectly sound mind and had the legal right to sign this paper. We even had a doctor check her on the same day to stop any challenges like this. You are, of course, free to fight this will in court. But I must tell you, that with the steps we have taken, the chances of changing a legal will like this are, to be honest, close to zero. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. It wasn't just the silence in the room, but a silence inside me. It wasn't victory, not feeling good about being right. It was a deep, sad feeling for Beatrice, and something older, something like justice. Mr. Davies went on, his voice even. The will also has a second part. If Mrs. Eliza Monroe, for any reason, chooses to say no to the inheritance, the whole property is to be sold and the money given to the Beatrice Prescott Foundation for the Arts and Women, a charity she started herself. It meant that, no matter what, Harrison would not get a single cent. I sat there, stunned. Say no? I didn't need Beatrice's money, not the houses or the paintings. But this wasn't about money, it never was. This was about what she believed, about what she saw in me, and about what she chose to protect. I looked straight at Harrison, then at Kendall. I took a breath and said, clearly, I accept. Those two simple words were enough to set the room on fire. Harrison jumped to his feet, his chair flying back and hitting the bookshelf with a thud. You are a snake, a sneaky gold digger. He stopped himself, his eyes darting to Mr. Davies, who just raised an eyebrow. My mother would never do this. She loved me. I looked at him, really looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had promised to protect me. She loved the man you used to be, Harrison, I said softly, but every word was sharp. Please, Kendall sneered. The old woman was clearly fooled. Tell them, Harrison. Tell them this is a total scam. Harrison didn't answer. He just stood there, breathing hard, his face twisted with anger and shock. Just then, Mr. Davies coughed lightly. Before I read the Harrison for his 18th birthday. I remembered that day. She had said, so that my son may always find his way home. Harrison picked up the compass. A small folded piece of paper was tied to it. Mr. Davies said, Mrs. Prescott asked me to read this note out loud. He picked up the paper and read, To my son, Harrison, I leave you this compass, with the hope that one day you might use it to find yourself again. It was a punch to the gut. Not a punishment with money, but a deep sadness packed into one short sentence. Harrison stood frozen, the compass seeming to grow heavy in his hand. His face fell. After that tense moment, Mr. Davies took out a single, carefully sealed envelope. He opened it with an almost holy respect. His voice changed as he read, softer now, as if he too felt the weight of the words he was about to speak. My dearest Eliza, my breath caught in my throat. If you are hearing these words, then I have left this world, and you are sitting in a room I have imagined many times. I hope you are well. I want to begin by thanking you for everything. Thank you for your kindness, your endless patience, and for the way you cared for me, not just in my final days, but through the years, even when others had forgotten I existed beyond being a name on donation checks. You were never just my daughter-in-law, Eliza. In my heart, you were the daughter I never had. I remember the first day Harrison brought you home. You were so nervous, your hands shook a little as you held your teacup. But in your eyes I saw a realness and a quiet strength. I knew right then that my son was far luckier than he deserved. Tears started to well up, hot and stinging, but I wouldn't let them fall. I wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing me weak. I knew everything, Eliza. I knew about Kendall Shaw, about the baby, about the long cheating. I knew about the nights you cried alone in the guest room when you thought no one could hear. I knew you stayed quiet when you had every right to scream. I knew you kept your self-respect when they offered you none. I am sorry for not talking about it with you, but I saw it all, and I never stopped being proud of you. A truly strong woman is not one who never falls, but one who knows how to get up with grace. I looked down at my clenched hands. They were no longer shaking. I could not leave this world without making things right. I am not doing this to punish Harrison, though it may feel that way. His choices are his own punishment. I am doing this to protect you. Because you deserve a new start, a chance to build a life of your own, on your own terms, free from the shadow of the Prescott name or my son's mistakes. Mr. Davies' voice shook a little for the first time. Always looked down on. Men who see loyalty as a problem and love as a deal. You cheated on the one woman who truly stood by you, who saw the best in you even when you had stopped trying. I hope one day you will understand why I could not give the family's legacy to someone who wasted his most precious gift, a good heart. I hope you will learn that some things in life, like trust, like honor, like being a good person, matter more than the names on a legal paper. The room was completely silent when he finished. Kendall stared into space, her face blank. Harrison's eyes were red, but he blinked fast and turned his face away, looking out the window where the rain was still falling. I sat still, the echo of Beatrice's words circling me like a song of freedom. She had seen me, she had known everything, and she had chosen me. I didn't look back as I left that law office, not at Harrison, who stood stunned like a statue, not at Kendall, who was whispering angrily in his ear. I walked out into the hallway like someone coming out of a thick fog that had covered my life for years, as if I had just been handed the final chapter of a book I didn't even know I was reading. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky wasn't totally clear, but there was a stillness in the air, a freshness after the storm, as if something had been washed clean. A storm that had swept not just through the city, but through my soul. I walked to my car, no longer noticing the weight of my shoes or the damp dress. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere between sadness and understanding. Beatrice had seen me. She had seen everything and still loved me. She had chosen me not out of pity, not out of duty, but because, to her, I mattered. And now, for the first time in a very long time, I had a choice. A week later, the piles of legal papers began to arrive. I spent days on end with Mr. Davies, a man who was not only a great lawyer, but also a wise and kind guide. We sold most of the property, the house in Boston, the apartment in New York, the art collection. I kept the summer house on Martha's Vineyard, but not to live in. I gave half the money to the charity with Beatrice's name. The rest I kept, not out of anger, not for revenge, but because, for the first time in my life, I could. It was money for my freedom. I left Boston. I needed a place free from the ghosts of the past. With Mr. Davies' help, I found a small town in Vermont, near the Green Mountains, named Maple Bridge. Quiet, green, the kind of place where people still wave from their porches, and the local coffee shop knows your name. Beatrice had once told me she spent her childhood summers in Vermont. It felt right to go back to her roots, to start over. There was an old storefront on Main Street, once a bookstore, but empty for years. Its windows were dusty, the wooden sign faded, but when I saw it, with ivy climbed there, I bought it right away, naming it the Hearth. A place for warmth, for people to gather, for new starts. I spent months fixing it up, not with fancy builders and designers, but with my own 2 hands and the help of a few local people who slowly became friends. Especially Gus, a grumpy but kind-hearted old carpenter who taught me the difference between oak and pine and how to use a wood planer. "City girl," he'd often grumble, but with a smile in his eye. "You sure ain't afraid to get your hands dirty, I'll give you that." "I've lived in a fake clean life for too long, sir," I'd reply, and we would share a laugh. I started baking again, a love I had long since given up. Beatrice's apple pie recipe, handwritten on a yellowed card, was the first thing I made. The crust was flaky, the apple filling rich with cinnamon, brushed with an egg wash for a golden shine, just the way she liked it. The first time, it was a little burnt. The second, the crust wasn't crispy enough. The third time, it was perfect. And when I took the first bite, I cried. Not for the pie, but because I knew she would have been proud. The opening day was not a big deal. I didn't hang banners or have a party. I simply placed a small wooden sign carved by Gus in the window that read, "Open," and unlocked the door. The first customers were an old couple who shared a slice of pie and told me about their cross-country road trip in the 70s. Slowly, the hearth began to fill. Young mothers with strollers, college students with laptops, retired couples reading in silence. The smell of baked apples and warm bread drifted down the street, drawing people in. And I began to breathe again, a deep, full breath. There was no big moment, no huge change, just a growing, daily peace. For the first time in years, I was building something of my own. Not for anyone else, not to prove my worth, but because I wanted to, because I could. Peace, I was learning, doesn't mean the past goes away forever. It just means you have the strength to face it when it returns. It was a Thursday morning in fall, nearly a year after I'd moved to Maple Bridge. I was wiping down the counter, getting ready for the morning rush, the soft morning light streaming through the window when the bell on the door chimed. I looked up and froze. He was standing there. Harrison. He looked 10 years older. His once perfectly styled hair now had streaks of gray and looked messy. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by faded jeans and an old jacket. There was no Kendall, no baby, no trace of pride in his posture. He just stood there, alone, looking lost and tired. Shelves filled with old books, and the jars of wildflowers on the windowsills. "You did all this?" "I did," I said, my voice even. It's beautiful." He was quiet for a moment. "I came to say, I'm sorry for everything." In that moment, the air seemed to change. I knew I was no longer the Eliza from a year ago. "I know I don't deserve to be standing in front of you," he went on, his voice almost breaking. "But not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did. I lost everything, Eliza. Kendall left right after the reading, said I was a failure. She took the baby. I lost you. I lost the life we built." "No," I said, my voice still steady but firm. "You threw it away, Harrison." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Not love, not guilt, but total emptiness. And for the first time standing before him, I didn't feel small. I felt whole. Can we talk?" he begged. "Just for a minute? I don't know where else to go." I looked at him, the empty shell of the man I once loved, now standing before me like a beggar. And then I said it, not with anger but with a final clear thought. "No, Harrison, we have nothing left to talk about." I walked around the counter, not giving him a chance to reply. "You didn't just cheat on me, Harrison. You erased me. You threw away everything I gave you, everything we ever were, and tossed it aside like it was trash. And now, when it's all gone, you come back here hoping for what? That I'm still the same weak woman standing where you left me?" I don't know." His voice cracked. "I do," I went on, my voice getting stronger. "I'm happy, Harrison, genuinely happy, and it's not because of the money or the houses. I'm happy because I rebuilt my life from the mess you made. I found peace without you. I found a purpose, and I will never, ever let you take that away from me again." I walked to the door and held it open. The bell chimed, sharp and final. "You need to leave," I said, "and don't ever come back." He stood there for a moment, his desperate eyes searching for a crack in my voice, for the old version of the woman who would have begged him to stay. But that woman was long gone. He walked out slowly, his shoulders slumped, as if the sun itself was too heavy for him. I let the door swing shut behind him. The bell rang one last time. Then, silence. That night, after locking up the hearth, I stood in the darkness for a long time, looking out at the quiet street. I thought of Beatrice, looking out at her rose garden from her sunroom, but this time, a courtroom. But it wasn't like that. Healing came quietly, in the kindness of strangers who became friends. In the chime of the bell every morning. In Beatrice's yellowed recipe cards. And sometimes, in the quiet of the closed hours, I would sit by the window with a cup of chamomile tea and think of her. She had given me more than a fortune. She had given me a mirror. And in it, I didn't just find myself. I found the courage to start again. One afternoon, a little girl handed me a crayon drawing on a napkin. 2 stick figures stood under a rainbow in front of a house that was clearly the Hearth. "This place feels safe," she said. I kept that napkin, framed it, and hung it near the door. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. Years ago, I walked into a law office expecting to be forgotten. I left with a future. And now, every time I unlock the front door and flip the sign to open, I know exactly who I am. I am not a victim. I am not what was left behind. I am Eliza Monroe. And this is my home.